Story 1. Corporate professionals, be honest. Do you actually work diligently for a full 40 hours a week? Or is it more of a choreographed performance of looking busy? It depends on the week. Some weeks I do 20 hours of work, while other weeks I do 60. What is the most creative way you have filled the time? Why do you think I am here? Story 2. It has its ups and downs. Sometimes it's 10 hours, sometimes it's 60. Pays well, but when things go wrong, there's no option to call out. There is high freedom and high expectations. You can create your own schedule and prioritize what you think is important, but at the end of the quarter, if you're not where you need to be, there's no way to fix it quickly. You just have to hope you're trusted for another quarter, or you could be pushed out due to financial considerations. Story 3. I spend 30% of my time in the office. 1 day, 1 week, and 2 days the next. I save all my work for office days, but sometimes that's not enough to appear busy. When I'm not in the office, I take naps, walk the dog, prepare dinner, and engage in weekend activities. Sometimes I feel that this isn't right. Other times, I remind myself that the company had a £40 billion income last year. My daughter wants me to pursue something more fulfilling. However, I enjoy naps, walking the dog, and being able to cover all my bills. Story 4. If you are looking for a cool way to fill time during those downtime hours at your desk, check out Zooniverse. It is a platform where scientists crowdsource their research data on various projects. From wavelengths of light from space to old writings from the Civil War and counting flowers in a field to aid declining bee populations, it's quite interesting. You follow a quick tutorial for each project on how to classify data, which mainly involves clicking through some pictures, but it contributes to real science projects. It's a great way to spend 20 minutes at a time while doing something positive for the planet instead of just scrolling mindlessly. Story 5. When I was working, I probably only worked 10 to 20 hours a week and just looked busy the rest of the time. My first job out of college was at one of those places where, even if you completed your work quickly, you still face criticism for not appearing busy for the entire 40 hours. I learned to be creative there and maintained that approach throughout the rest of my career. Story 6. I work from home and have been burnt out from overworking. Sometimes I sit down at 9 a.m. and work nonstop until 5:30 or 6 p.m., totaling over 40 hours a week. I've been trying to stop since my workplace is not pleasant, and we may be facing layoffs by the end of the first quarter. When I don't want to work, I just start a meeting with myself and remain online all day. Story 7. I work from home and occasionally lie on the sofa next to my computer, moving the mouse with my tummy while I doze. I feel that if I were in the office, I would still get less done because of people talking to me. Story 8. My career lasted 30 years. During that time, only my early manual labor jobs required a hard 40 hours per week. Once I moved into the technology sector, I worked between 15 to 20 actual hours a week. The rest was spent in non-productive meetings, walking around with a pen and folder, or hiding out in the server room. Story 9. Very little of what I do involves time-elapsed activities. I am paid to use my imagination and experience to solve or avoid problems. Sometimes this occurs once a week, and other times many times a day. The number of hours in my contract is not indicative of the desired and achieved outcomes. Story 10. Right now, it's not even a well-choreographed performance. I am sitting here in the office, munching on white cheddar popcorn and reading Reddit. I spent most of the morning trying to look busy, but at 1:36 p.m., I am out of ideas. Story 11. Nobody works at full capacity all the time. Literally nobody should ever be expected to. Story 12. Some jobs I had involved working most of the time. Good management can motivate people to care about what they are doing. My last job had the worst manager I have ever encountered, and it resulted in me doing as little work as possible. Story 13. I do work, but my work isn't going to save anyone's life. There are moments when I allow myself some leeway. I admit to prioritizing things that are technically non-work, like the hour I spent with IT because of computer problems. The issue was that my headphone jack randomly stopped working, and I wasn't going to do that boring job without listening to my metal playlist at the same time. Story 14. I worked 996 hours for 5 years. I didn't need to look busy because I was always busy. Now I work around 30 hours a week and I browse Reddit at work. I don't need to look busy because I have my own office. Story 15. I completed the tasks assigned to me diligently. However, this does not mean I sought additional work upon finishing my assignments. It is the manager's responsibility to allocate tasks. Story 16. Oh, not at all. Some weeks I have a lot to do and stay busy the whole time, plus I work overtime. Other weeks, I have very little to do and find myself padding out the time. It would be more efficient and cost-effective for my company, since I am an hourly employee, if I could work from home and only work during the hours I have actual tasks to complete. However, my company requires me to be in the office, so I sit there at their expense. Story 17. I work a full 40 to 45 hours from home and am almost always busy throughout the day. Sometimes, I step away to do house chores between meetings, which frees up my evening. I view this arrangement as a privilege for both parties. They receive as much or more productivity from me than if I were in the office, and in return, I gain flexibility. When I'm not busy with work or chores, I look for ways to help the organization improve. Story 18. When I had a job in an office, I often ran out of work to do. To avoid appearing idle, I would place a note on my desk indicating that I was going on an imaginary errand and then go to the gym for 1 or 2 hours before returning. It was helpful that I was on the safety committee so I could pretend I was checking the fire extinguishers in the buildings. Story 19. In my 12 years in the professional world, I have rarely worked a full 40 hours of actual work. However, I have spent more than 40 hours in the office because I procrastinate and struggle to motivate myself to work. Most of the time, I perform less than 20 hours of real work per week, but I am efficient and effective when I do. In entry-level corporate jobs, such as in call centers, I was consistently working because I had to be, as calls came in throughout the day. Occasionally, it would be slow, so I would not be working the entire time. However, I was normally working, except for scheduled breaks or trips to the restroom. Story 20. Like many others have said, it depends on the week. I also think it depends on the person. In certain places, one person does 90% of the work and is busy from dawn until dusk while the others do almost nothing. Story 21. For a 40-hour week, I will do 10 to 15 hours each week, and possibly 25 to 30 hours during very busy weeks. I fill my time by studying for career certifications, reading the news, or enjoying my book. Story 22. Look at these responses. Yet, Elon Musk would have us believe that waste and inefficiency exist only in the public sector, and that by privatizing everything, it will operate more efficiently. What a load of nonsense. Story 23. When I divided my time between the office and working from home, I worked extremely hard to justify the remote work arrangement. Now that my company has decided it is mandatory for us to be in the office full-time, I have never felt less motivated in my entire career. The incentive to work myself to exhaustion to make my employers richer is nowhere near as strong as the need to maintain my work-life balance. So, I refuse to accept this situation. Story 24. I switched from a blue-collar job to an at-home white-collar job. Some days I earn my paycheck and some days I don't. That's what happens when you develop a specialized skill set that not everyone can do. In my previous blue-collar job, I was constantly busy, but the days went by quickly. You were always working, no matter what. You learned to adapt. You worked weekends, came in sick, and came in hurt. With the white-collar job, it tends to even out. It's very intense on Mondays and most of Tuesday, but Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are generally pretty relaxed. Our busy seasons are in January, February, May, October, and November. I work 11 to 12-hour days on Mondays and sometimes Tuesdays in January and February, whereas I have less work on Thursdays and Fridays during the summer. There are days when I clock in, zone out, and do only a few tasks throughout the day. I have a much better work-life balance, and my back hurts much less now. Story 25. Answers should specify whether respondents are managers or individual contributors. Corporate management roles often lead to inefficiencies. It can feel like individuals are more focused on their own interests rather than fostering productivity. This experience shaped my career and ultimately led to my retirement. It is a reflection of the challenges within the corporate environment. Story 26. My workload varies throughout the month due to recurring activities at the beginning or end of each month, along with demands from colleagues or other departments. There are days when I am highly productive for 6 to 7 hours, particularly when I have a task that allows me to focus deeply and achieve a state of flow for an extended period. On other days, my workload is significantly lower, and I may only need to be available for 1 to 2 hours. If I am in the office that day, I can keep myself occupied by meeting with team members. If I am working from home, I might take an hour to complete some tasks around the house, such as sweeping or vacuuming the staircase, which is on my to-do list for tomorrow. Additionally, I sometimes browse online forums to maintain the illusion of productivity. Story 27. There have been weeks where I have worked 25 to 30 hours and other weeks where I have easily done over 80 hours. Sometimes it's feast or famine, but it's nice to reflect on your systems and consider how to improve them during downtime, which can help reduce the number of weeks exceeding 80 hours. Story 28. The workload varies from week to week. Some weeks, I am extremely busy, and the only way to complete everything and meet deadlines is to work 50 to 60 hours. Fortunately, I am remote, so those long days are not as demanding as if I were going into the office. Other weeks, work is slower, and while I am logged in for 40 hours, I am actually working more like 25 to 30 hours, filling the time with trivial tasks or managing personal responsibilities. Overall, it all balances out in the end. Story 29. I am contracted for 37 hours, but it really depends on the workload. Today, I spent an hour on Reddit, so I was obviously not that busy. Other weeks, I am working 100% of the time. Story 30. Does working in an office at a university as a staff employee count as being in a corporate environment? If so, I can relate to some of the people here, as I often complete a whole day's work in less than half a day, leaving the rest of the time largely unproductive. I'm becoming increasingly bored, and it's taking a toll on my mental health. I feel the need to move away from office work. Story 31. Before retirement, I had one particular middle management job in my office-based career, which was my second career after leaving the military. I can say with hand on heart that I mostly did the bare minimum while appearing very busy and organized. My favorite ways to spend a hangover day included asking the administrative assistant to schedule a series of meetings with suppliers in advance of a night out, allowing me to go from meeting room to meeting room without anyone ever showing up. I spent the entire day walking around talking to my team members to check how they were doing and if they needed anything. I would stroll around the head office looking busy with my project portfolio under my arm, stopping to grab coffee from various vending machines in the building. Basically, I had to work hard for about 15% of the time, and they were not interested in any innovation or additional contributions I could make to the job. Therefore, I stopped trying to introduce new ideas and just did what I was paid to do within the expected time frame. As far as I know, no one ever noticed my minimal effort. No one had to pick up any slack because I wasn't leaving any. I received 2 promotions while with that company, but they did not provide any motivation or inspiration to genuinely innovate and be productive rather than just appear to be busy. Story 32. I actively work for 20 to 25 hours most weeks. A significant portion of my pay is based on the availability of my expertise during regular work hours. This has been confirmed to me numerous times over the years. I listen to many audiobooks and music discreetly while appearing to be engaged in an urgent project. I also schedule numerous meetings with like-minded individuals who have similar discretionary time. Story 33. I work remotely, but my work is deliverable-based. Sometimes it's incredibly busy, and I find myself working on weekends to stay ahead. Other times, I spend my time working out, reading, watching TV, or browsing the web. It really depends on what's happening, but I have never missed a deadline and always complete my tasks to a high standard. So no one has ever had reason to complain or ask about my work. Story 34. Yes, always 40 hours and sometimes more. I find that if my workload decreases, such as during slower months, I tend to become less motivated overall. Story 35. Well, let me see. I usually come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door so my supervisor doesn't see me. Then I just sit at my desk and sort of space out for an hour. I'd say in a given week, I do about 15 minutes of real work. Story 36. I complete my tasks efficiently. Some days that means focusing for the full 8 hours or more. Other days it involves being creative with how I manage my time. Story 37. I meet over 100% of my goals ahead of the deadline. Does it matter how many hours I was working? Story 38. Most weeks, I work about 10 hours and spend time on Reddit or reading my book when I have nothing else to do. I don't believe I have ever worked a full 40 hours of actual work. Story 39. Depends on the day. Mondays and Fridays are full days for me. From Tuesday to Thursday, I am creatively looking busy. And by that, I mean browsing Reddit and YouTube. I have some pet projects that need to be completed, so I will probably start filling my time with those. Story 40. I used to work really hard. Maybe the breaks were a bit too long, but I filled my time with work. That was before I went from doing plain work myself to preparing work for others and guiding those people without the authority to choose them or truly direct them. I dislike it and am getting very burned out. My productivity has plummeted. Some days, between all the questions and interruptions, I hardly accomplish any actual work. I handle a disproportionate amount of this work because many of my coworkers are simply not competent enough to do it. The hiring practices of a former supervisor continue to affect us negatively because, since we implemented new systems, we need people who can actually understand things rather than just memorize basic procedures. Story 41. Corporate folks, be honest. Do you actually work diligently for a full 40 hours a week? Or is it more of a well-choreographed performance of looking busy? The nature of my work is extremely variable. Some weeks I'll do maybe 5 to 10 hours of actual work. Others, I will find a way to fit 70 hours of project time into 40 hours. It depends on how many bids, tenders, and quotes I have to put together in mechanical engineering. What's the most creative way you've filled the time? I pull up drawings and specifications on 2 of my 3 monitors and keep something like a news site or crossword puzzle open on the 3rd. Story 42. I scheduled a call once a week for 2 hours when I could not be disturbed. I used my cell phone and kept my work phone on the line so my assistant would see that my work phone was busy, allowing me to take a break. It was the best mental health break I had and made me a much more effective employee afterward. Story 43. I know I accomplish more focused work when I am working from home than when I am in the office. However, I do not believe anyone truly completes 40 hours of work in 40 hours. The mind and body both require breaks. Story 44. I no longer work at that job. It was easy to be honest. I probably did about 8 to 10 hours of actual work per week. Market research and skill building were code for me watching videos on the internet. Story 45. I don't know what a 40-hour workweek looks like. I have my own company now and work about 55 hours a week. When I worked for someone else, it was 70 to 80 hours. To me, it doesn't seem like there are many people in between. Story 46. Other than meetings, I control my time. I know what tasks are date and time-driven as well as those that are open-ended, organizing my days accordingly. I have never wondered what to do during idle time. I have been fortunate to avoid it. I work in information technology. I have the advantage of aligning my employer with my work style. Be confident, deliver results, and the right supervisor will give you the freedom to manage your responsibilities. Story 47. When I worked as a corporate chemist, it involved either 36 or 48 hours of diligent work, day in and day out, with 12-hour shifts on a rotating schedule. It was a grind but compensated exceptionally well. Story 48. I used to work 50 to 60 hours at least. It was too much work with no time to spare. Now I've moved up a few positions, and I would say I do about 35 hours of work when I am working remotely and 10 hours of work if I am in the office. Story 49. An average uneventful day. I have 2 hours of work in my 9-hour day. Some days I feel like there is not enough time left, but unless there are urgent issues to address, it is quite dull. Story 50. I do what is assigned to me. If that is not enough for 40 hours, I let them know I have availability, but my time spent looking busy is mostly reading company documents and taking training on various topics. I am rarely without tasks, but if I find myself without things to do, I can fill my time with learning activities. Story 51. I write for a living, so most of my work is done in Word documents and the occasional Excel sheet. For the more professional-looking tasks, I have manually tabulated the odds of various upgrades, abilities, and scenarios in a miniatures game, X-Wing. In Excel to better understand their mechanics and statistics. Translated a runic language from a video game, Tunic, into conventional English. While I did find a website that explained how to identify the sounds of various runes, by the end of the transcription, I could effectively read the language and write my own messages. This skill has since been forgotten. Charted weekly production trends for fantasy football to determine optimal player selections. Recalculated my fantasy football records based on different schedules. Scouted players for my Dynasty League, created lists of preferred picks and contingencies, and analyzed potential cuts for upcoming seasons. Written for personal enjoyment. Tracked bills, attempted to understand taxes, and managed general budgeting. Conducted a lot of mundane exploration, keeping a scratch document open for various topics, which has now reached almost 100,000 words. For the casual activities, I've streamed video games on my laptop. Watched shows and sports on popular streaming services. Viewed shows and sports on less reputable websites, hoping to avoid damaging my laptop. Enjoyed long lunches playing cards with a friend. Played a solo board game at my desk a few times. Story 52. My day today started with checking my email, but there was nothing new in my inbox. The person next to me asked if I was invited to the meeting, but I guess they forgot to add me. I decided to browse Reddit for a couple of hours. The person next to me started laughing, and I asked him what was funny. One of the people in the meeting accidentally turned his camera on, revealing he was shirtless in his bed, and he is a CEO of a company, mind you. I chatted with a couple of coworkers about random things until lunch. I had a 10-minute call with someone about program updates. I got 6 new projects assigned to me, panicked for a moment, but then realized they were simple projects. I sent a few emails and then went back to relaxing until quitting time. Story 53. I believe it balances out for me. There are weeks when I definitely work less than 40 hours and other weeks when I work over 60 hours. In total, I think it averages to 40 hours. Story 54. It depends on my current workload. My 40 hours does not just represent when I am supposed to be working. It indicates when I am available to be contacted about work. If you message me after my shift, you will have to wait until the next day for a proper response. Story 55. You can start a meeting, share your screen, and play a video that everyone else in the meeting will see you busy presenting. Story 56. Coming from residential construction, the answers are as we anticipated. That is a much different environment. Story 57. What's the difference between working diligently for 40 hours per week and performance? I'm not pretending. However, I also don't receive enough work for the former, despite having asked for more multiple times. I've given up. Story 58. I haven't worked 40 hours in a long time, not regularly anyway. I kept trying to tell my wife she was working too much. She worked 60 to 70 hours a week in a corporate job, trying to do it all. They treated her poorly. No more. 40 hours and out now. Story 59. I was a middle manager in an industry that was very cyclical, either on the upswing or the downswing. As a salaried employee, I worked over 50 hours a week consistently, receiving pay for only 40 hours. I wished for days when I could relax a bit and clock out at 40 hours. Story 60. In my last corporate job, I didn't have work to do for a long time. It felt embarrassing, even though very few people knew, that I ended up quitting due to the dread of feeling worthless. I created work for myself out of desperation for a time. This was well after I wrote Belated PNG. I had all these skills for getting people away from Flash and onto animated SVG, but couldn't find a place for my skills. I don't know if I could go back to corporate work, even though it pays well. I took a 90% pay cut, and I no longer live in daily dread. Story 61. I am the boss. I hold staff meetings to address individual actions, walk through workspaces with a critical expression, microwave fish in the public kitchen despite having my own, ask people if they are okay, and I am always 10 minutes late to your performance review. It is intentional. Story 62. Most of my time is taken up by meetings with my direct reports, customers, colleagues in other business functions, and my supervisor. This accounts for approximately 30 hours per week. Additionally, I complete about 20 hours of focused work at my desk. Story 63. I appear busy about 80% of the time. In my defense, I regularly request more work. I suppose there is just not enough to go around. It seems that corporations exist mainly for people to pay taxes while the wealthy benefit. But what do I know? Story 64. At times it has been so bad that I would just sit there and tell myself, don't let the screensaver come on. Story 65. I don't think I have ever consistently worked fewer than 40 hours. The workload varies. There are weeks when, if I were operating at full efficiency, I could complete my tasks in about 30 hours. However, most weeks I have enough work that even at 90% efficiency, I am still putting in around 45 hours. Consequently, I rarely experience any downtime. Story 66. Some weeks I work 15 hours, while other weeks I work 65 hours. I keep track to ensure I do not work more than I am paid for. It all averages out to 40 hours in a week. Story 67. I am an accountant for a company. If it is the week before or after the month ends, I am overwhelmed with work and do not see the outside of my office. During the 2 weeks in between, I work remotely on my home computer and play a game half the time. Story 68. I spent at least 5 years working on my side business website during an 11-hour shift. I also demonstrated and purchased new remote access software and spoke to a potential client while on the job. Story 69. I rarely work a full 40 hours. I alternate between working in the office and from home. When I am at home, I prioritize home projects, which leads to a backlog of work to tackle in the office. Even when I am in the office, I am only busy for about 2 days. There is a short period where I likely complete 30 to 40 hours of actual work, though it is probably closer to 30 hours if I exclude meetings, some of which are necessary for my job. In my previous position at the same company, where I earned about $20,000 less and did not work weekends, I was working 40 to 50 hours each week. It was difficult, especially as a temporary employee in the same role with no paid time off. Story 70. It depends on how much I need to do in a given week. I've worked close to or even over the full 40 hours the past couple of weeks because of deadlines, but other weeks I have a lot of downtime. If I'm in the office, I pretend to look busy and then use my phone when most of my coworkers go for lunch. When I'm working from home, I watch videos, and if I feel I can get away with it, I take a nap for an hour or so. Story 71. The thing about corporate jobs, at least the ones I have experienced, is that a significant portion of the tasks I am asked to complete often depends on other people. I often find myself waiting for someone above or below me to do their part of the task. Waiting for information. Waiting for parts to be delivered or some other environmental factor to reach a certain point before I can proceed with my part. A significant portion of my job, over 90% of the skill involved, is juggling tasks. If I have 20 tasks in my queue, I must use my instincts or make educated guesses about the order in which they might align. I try to plan ahead by positioning resources or openings in my schedule so that when things start to fall into place, they do so as anticipated. However, I cannot control any of that. Things often happen in an order that I could never have predicted. This also assumes that nothing changes. If I am working on a project that lasts 3 to 6 months and I plan out the steps in a specific order from the beginning, that order can entirely change within 1 month if external environmental factors shift unexpectedly. A lot of my job consists of constantly adapting to that change. I generally have to plan 3 to 4 different paths to achieve a specific goal while working on those paths simultaneously, because inevitably 2 or 3 of those paths are likely to falter. If I am not constantly planning for contingencies and focus solely on one path to a goal, my chances of success are reduced. Additionally, a significant portion of my job requires me to use my own equipment and resources. For example, today I needed to add 3 iPads to Apple Business Manager. One method to accomplish this is by using the iOS app Apple Configurator, but that requires the Wi-Fi network to allow the discovery of neighboring devices, which ours does not. Our work Wi-Fi also has a captive portal that is incompatible with Apple Configurator. Therefore, it was much easier for me to take the 3 iPads home, complete the necessary tasks, and then return to work to hand them to the user. Story 72. I should preface this by saying that I like my job for the most part and respect the company I work for, which probably makes a difference. My work is relatively relaxed. I'm expected to be logged in during certain hours, and I have a varying amount of work to complete throughout the year. When it's busy, I stay focused and do not take excessive breaks. I might take a moment to make lunch without signing out, switch my laundry, or take a short mental break, which is no different from chatting with my coworkers or taking a quick walk to refill my water. When it's slow at the office, I might take longer walks for water or scroll on my phone in the restroom, attempting to appear busy while accomplishing little. While at home, I'm often walking on my treadmill, sometimes watching a show or talking to my spouse, but I remain available for emails or calls as soon as they come in. My work gets done either way, but my quality of life at home is significantly better. Story 73. I am primarily a manager now, so about 70% of my time is spent in meetings, either for projects, interviews, or planning. It depends on how you define work, but I usually average around 45 hours a week. Story 74. For me, it just averaged out. I would work 60-hour weeks and have days filled with crisis management, and then do very little for 2 days and leave early on Friday. As long as my billing hours were good and deadlines were met, it never really seemed to be an issue. Story 75. Nice try, Doge. Musk is coming for the private sector next, everyone. This is just a more polite way to start the process. So, you all slack off at work too, right? Story 76. I work in a cubicle providing information technology support for an internet service provider. Some days we are swamped, while other days I might have as few as 0 tickets during a 10-hour shift. When I was hired, they explained that this would be the case and they understood. They said we can do whatever we want during our downtime as long as we do not miss any deadlines. My coworkers usually watch movies or stream content, while I bring my own laptop to work on personal projects. Story 77. In my last information technology position, each task had a defined amount of time during which it was expected to be completed. I tried my hardest to complete as much work as possible and was finishing tasks in 1/4 to 1/2 of the expected time. After submitting a couple of timesheets reflecting this performance, my supervisor spoke to me and indicated that if I continued this way, my chances of advancement would actually decrease. All I would achieve would be reduced time expectations for each task, and my coworkers probably would not appreciate that. Performance bonuses only required that you meet the expected time to complete a task. The bonus did not increase with additional performance improvements. You either received it or you did not. Still, I wanted to impress. After that, I could fill a 12-hour timesheet, completing each task in slightly less time than expected in about 4 hours. I then spent the remaining 8 hours of my shift studying or learning new technology areas, browsing Reddit, watching YouTube, or enjoying StarCraft 2. My performance statistics were still a little better than average, and I quite enjoyed my 8 years there and the bonuses that came with it. Story 78. Some days it's intense, working for 8 hours straight without breaks or lunch. Everything that needs doing gets done. Other days, I respond to Reddit posts like this one and start my 30-minute lunch timer after my food finishes cooking. Story 79. I worked in IT support for the majority of my career. I estimate that at least 50% of my time was spent on tasks unrelated to actual work. Some days and weeks I was working hard, while other times I did just enough to stay awake. I described my position as an insurance policy. You may dislike paying for it, but you are grateful to have it when you need it. When you do need it, it is essential. Story 80. I used to work 10 to 20 hours and try to appear busy. Now I have more responsibilities and work about 50 hours, but still can't get it all done. I prefer the 50 hours of activity, though. It is more rewarding. Story 81. Have I just worked in difficult places? I keep seeing posts where the general consensus is that people working in corporate environments work around 10 hours a week. That has never been the case for me. At my last job, everyone on my team worked every waking moment and beyond, especially considering we were on call 24/7. Story 82. I take my 30-minute lunch and my two 15-minute breaks every day. That leaves me with 35 hours of active work time. Honestly, I am actively working for probably 33 to 34 of those hours. I receive points for each file I work on, and there are performance standards and total points I am expected to meet every pay period. There is so much work that I do not have any downtime. I work from home, but once I am done for the day, I am done. The work will still be there tomorrow, and we are forbidden from working outside our scheduled hours unless we have been pre-approved for overtime. Story 83. I took several independent study courses from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They are not related to my job, but they appear more professional than playing games or browsing social media. Story 84. At my last job, one of my managers gave me this piece of advice on how to handle the ups and downs of busyness. They don't need you 100% of the time, but when they need you, they need all of you. Story 85. I am an IT operations staff engineer for a Fortune 500 company, and I am absolutely overwhelmed every day of the week. My internal customers have to wait a week to get on my calendar, and it's probably a 2-week lead time for anything we undertake. There is no downtime at all. It is more about deciding what gets pushed to the backlog while we address the loudest complaints. All the necessary attention and care are not happening, much less any future plans or real lifecycle management. Other organizations of this size have twice our headcount and are 3 times better run, but our profit margins aren't as high as some. However, we are far from struggling. Management is quite frugal, but when they make an investment, they commit fully. Based on my salary, it seems they are continuing to cut costs in labor as the primary area for savings. Story 86. Much earlier in my career, before smartphones, I wrote a Yahtzee program in Excel and Visual Basic. Even someone looking over my shoulder would think it was a logistics spreadsheet. Our shipping manager thought I was a genius when I gave him a copy. During the slow season, this program saved the company more than 20 times my salary that year. To put it in context. Story 87. It depends on the week. Some weeks, I barely have time to take a break, while other weeks, I spend a lot of time scrolling through online listings and looking at houses I can't afford. Story 88. The best approach is to work at 75% speed most of the time to be able to ramp up to 125% when it counts. Story 89. I would say there are many meetings, but half of them do not apply to me, nor do I understand why I am in them. Story 90. When I worked in academia, I put in about 45 to 50 hours per week, including all the research, but I was paid for 40 hours per week. In nonprofit organizations, I worked about 40 to 45 hours per week and was paid for 35 to 40 hours per week. In the public sector, I worked as little as 28 to 30 hours on good weeks, such as during team building days or training sessions, and as much as 60 to 70 hours during crunch weeks to meet deadlines. Generally, I worked about 45 hours per week and was invariably paid for 35 hours. While it wasn't a corporate environment, when I worked at a law firm years ago, I was paid for 40 hours per week, but I only performed about 30 to 60 minutes of work per day, spending most of my time browsing the internet or chatting. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.